It's good to wrap this by 7:45 because the buck drops on me.
I like your priority.
Good evening and welcome to the March 10th, 2026 meeting of the Westminster City Planning Commission. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Kinnear,
Here.
Commissioner Tomacek,
Here.
Commissioner Dunn,
Excused.
Chair Boschert,
Excused.
Vice Chair Carpenter,
Here.
Commissioner Zhang,
Here.
Commissioner Peg,
Here.
Commissioner Calling,
Excused.
Commissioner Morris.
Here.
So tonight's workshop is a little different than a typical planning commission meeting. Instead of considering land use cases and holding public hearings, tonight's meeting will be an informal workshop to receive a presentation and share ideas on the proposed Unified Development Code, or UDC. I guess we are ready for your presentation, Mr. Spurgeon.
Gavel is in. Is this
There.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Ronnie, maybe I should have reviewed the script tonight, but that's okay. We actually are bringing to you 4 different presentations that we've kind of merged together. So the first part, we're going to talk about our growth management system and how we manage our resources. Some of this is content that we've done with council recently, and we thought the Planning Commission may appreciate receiving some of that same material. Then Jacob is going to talk about our planning and development process, just as sort of a refresher, and for Commissioner Morris, sort of an introduction. Then John, then we're going to take a break, because based on the number of slides, we think people are going to need a break. But we'll plan on a break then, and then John is going to talk about sort of bridging the academic sense into actually putting it into a specific project on the ground. And then the last part will be the Unified Development Code, as you introduced. With that, nothing really new tonight that you all haven't seen before, but again, sort of a refresher and talk about where we go from here. So those are our 4 parts tonight. And again, just for the benefit of the commission, we wanted to share a few slides that we've been working with City Council on recently. Why manage growth? This may seem obvious to some of us, but just as a reminder, water is limited. Westminster, we've planned for the water needed to build out our comprehensive plan. We have taken into account conservation measures, weather, and land use patterns in that planning. About 88% of the water needed to build out the comprehensive plan is already allocated. And I would distinguish that is not 88% of our water portfolio. That's 88% of the water needed to build out our comprehensive plan. So there's that. Land is limited. We only have about 4% of our land area remaining for development, but if you look at the sites that already have development applications working or we've already approved development, it really only leaves about 2.3% after that. And about 40% of our land area in the comprehensive plan is for parks, open space, golf courses, and those sort of green spaces. And then finally, I'd say that we try to balance growth. We try to balance the service demands from growing too quickly and avoiding oversaturation with too many of any one development type and having more of a variety there. So looking back on the urbanization of Westminster, up until 1950, Westminster was, sort of a small town out on the high plains. And though it was near Denver, it was really not experiencing a lot of growth until after World War II. Similar to suburban communities all over the country, really, after World War II, there were housing programs, there were highway programs and other things that brought people to the suburbs. The city was growing, and then with the 1952 opening of the Boulder Turnpike, it really opened up, that whole northwest quadrant for growth. Unfortunately, Westminster actually started running out of water even back in those days. They had to institute the first water restrictions, and that was mainly because while there was water, there wasn't enough water for good fire flow, and so to be assured that there would be adequate water fire pressure in those lines, there actually was a series of sirens that would go off citywide that would usually you'd turn off your faucets to make sure water was in the system for fire response. In 1955, the city did a study for the first time stating that growth should be based on available water. Ooh, what a concept. Those two actions really sort of introduced into the city government the idea of correlating growth and water supply, and we've sort of continued that over the last 70 years. To give the city greater control over its destiny, the voters did approve the move to Home Rule Authority in 1957, which gives the city more latitude in the things it does. In a whole range of things, whether it's land use, economic development, criminal justice, or other matters. So the city continued to grow after becoming home rule. There was a drought in 1962 that was particularly impactful to the city. They call that the long, hot summer. Basically, what happened was the city needed to augment its water sources with water from ditches in order to ensure there was enough quantity. And the poor quality water, and apparently it was very stinky, this led to what we call the Mother's March on City Hall. And this is an actual photo at the old Westminster City Hall of the mothers. And they have this nice little sign that says, "Congratulations, city planners, you goofed the water," yada, yada, yada. So we've been unpopular with the public for many, many decades. But out of that, people came together to find a solution to this problem. There was a Citizens Water Committee. There were actually 2 votes of city residents on whether to join Denver Water or not, and both of those failed. And so with that, it basically forced Westminster to sort of grow up and build up its utility into a modern enterprise. And just like going to home rule, controlling our water resources gave us control over our destiny. The city's really biggest period of growth was in the 1970s. 1970 to 71 specifically, the town increased from 4.5 square miles to 28 square miles, which is really extending out close to our current boundaries. We're 34 square miles today. With that growth, though, again, there were challenges to water and our infrastructure. And the city, like most places, had this sort of first come, first serve basis for water taps until it was realized that there were plans in for about 28,000 dwelling units, but we had capacity to only serve 2,900. So that was a problem. That created what became the 1978 growth management program, which was in place for many years in Westminster. It also created better coordination between planning, water resources, and then working with City Council to identify priority types of projects for the city. The sort of pacing system that it used, again, was around for many years. That is no longer in place. That was repealed several years ago. It had really outlived its purpose at that point. The city's had sort of 4 comprehensive plans in its modern era. 1997 was really the first modern comprehensive plan. It had a real focus on housing. There's a lot of dialogue in there about getting the right types of housing to go with the jobs that were being pursued with the city's economic development initiatives at that time. And then having really highly amenitized neighborhoods, the kind of neighborhoods that many people in the room probably live in, with trails and parks and that kind of thing. The 2004 comprehensive plan, this one was, sort of being worked on during the dot-com bust of the first part of that decade, but it really supported a maximum flexibility paradigm. It was a lot of latitude in the land uses and where things could be. The 2013 plan sort of refocused growth, and it introduced the concept that you'll probably hear in these meetings when we talk about focus areas, and these are the areas that are the focus of housing and economic development initiatives, and where the infrastructure is going to support those higher densities. And then with our current comprehensive plan, the added focus on neighborhoods that came with our current comprehensive plan. The current comprehensive plan, it sets policy direction for the city's physical development. It's a communication tool to residents, developers, city council, other partners. It adds on to the city's vision statement and strategic plan with more of a long-term outlook on things. It focuses on enhancing vitality, and it's linked with a lot of other city plans like our transportation plan, our water supply plan, the sustainability plan, the parks plan, and so forth. It is a living document. It is meant to be revisited and amended based on the city's changing needs in the future. The plan's organized around 4 main cornerstones. I won't read these off, but these sort of overarching ideas permeate the whole document. The comprehensive plan was directly correlated with our water supply plan. In the past comprehensive plans and water supply plan, the city had used a system sort of averaging, where example projects were used as a proxy to understand future water needs. In this last case, we did a different methodology, though. We actually audited all 33,000 utility accounts, and those are linked in GIS, so we could understand different patterns of water use associated with land use. And there were thousands and thousands of model runs that literally ran for days with the consultant's computer. There were 4 sort of scenarios that were examined through that, sort of a lower growth kind of scenario. One was a super high growth, or actually 2 were super high growth. And then one that was sort of a business as usual that just continued the trends that we've had in Westminster into the future. But the 3 main variables were weather, land use, and conservation habits. And as you can see, the delta on these charts, weather and conservation really are the biggest drivers of future water demand. Having said that, the big but is land use is the one we can control as a city. We can't control the weather. We can influence conservation through things our utility does, but ultimately land use is one that's actually in the city's authority, which is tricky since that's the least impactful. Keep going here. So this is just an example that again shows how the comprehensive plan is directly related with the water supply plan. So there's an assumption of the water demand for those different land uses in acre feet per acre, and then you can see where they go on the land use map with the associated color. I will now turn it over to Jacob to talk about our development process.
Thank you, Andrew. Just a quick introduction. I'm Jacob Kaza, the principal planner for current development for the city. So I supervise 4 planners who do development review as their main focus, and then I also supervise our ODP inspector who does construction inspection for new projects and a couple of other things as well. Next slide. So the city has kind of a multi-layered land use control. So the first one Andrew kind of briefed you guys on is the comprehensive plan. And Westminster is pretty unique in that our comprehensive plan requires mandatory compliance through city code. So what the color you see on the map there is what the development should be built to. So when we receive a development application, we require them to follow whatever the plan says, or they have to come and seek a comprehensive plan amendment, which a property owner does have the ability to ask the city council to change the comprehensive plan for their parcel. The comp plan being mandatory is actually great for the way our system is set up. On the right there, you'll see the zoning map. Zoning maps, you'll usually see them as this, which is kind of a mix of color like how the comprehensive plan is. The one big difference for us is about 60% of our city is PUD, planned unit development. That's kind of a form of negotiated zoning where you craft a special district that applies just for yourself. Use we'll cover the documents, and you create rules that just apply for your community or your development itself. And the great thing about having the mandatory compliance comprehensive plan is it gives us as the negotiators for the city, the planners, we know what the expectation of the city and what the expectation of the community is. Most of our community is actually pretty good about this. They're familiar with the comprehensive plan. They know that that's the regulating document. And so they are often very confused if they see something that they think doesn't meet that category. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people are still very familiar with zoning being the controlling thing. And zoning for us controls what the existing land uses are, not what the future land uses should be. And that's really the key for the comprehensive plan. That regulates your future land uses. If you have an existing building on your site, you can still continue to use it for what it was built as. So that's kind of the one change there. Next slide, please. So in our system for planned unit development, this is PDPs are specific for planned unit development. They don't apply to our straight zoned or Euclidean zone districts. We use two different entitlement documents. The first entitlement document is the preliminary development plan. This is a very broad document. It's kind of like creating your zoning category is the way I like to explain it to people. So you're going to have a list of permitted uses. You'll have just a general site plan, any perimeter or constraints that you might have, and then it'll typically show some like natural features, adjoining roadways, and then access points. So in this example, it's very much just a simple bubble diagram, shows the parcel, shows how they can access it. And then in other sheets on this one, it'll say, here's the 20 uses you're allowed to do on the site, here's the setbacks you need to consider. So that's usually what we like to keep PDPs to, or preliminary development plans to. Next slide, please. So the second entitlement document, and we use this across the city for straight districts or for PUD districts, is the official development plan, or ODP. We amend these quite frequently. If you'll notice, this one says 28th amended. It's not uncommon to see that. The intent here is that this is a living, fluid document, and it's very much administrative approval. So say they just need to rearrange a parking stall, or they want to make a small change. Almost all those changes come to us administratively. We kind of call these a site-specific plan, but one thing to keep in mind is that has a different connotation when it comes to vested rights. So I tend to not use that all the time, but it's really, the ODP is designed to look granular at the site at essentially like a 6-inch scale. Every 6 inches, I need to know what surface cover you're going to use. Is there, where are the shrubs going? What's the mulch? What is the building going to look like? The planting, the parking, everything goes into that document. These can be, usually for a small pad site, they're 12 pages. For large development like Uplands, you guys have seen them over 100 pages. I imagine when we get the Erickson in one, that one would probably be pretty large as well. Next slide, please. So overall for our entitlement and construction milestones, so we start the development review process at the comprehensive plan. So if they're already compliant with the comprehensive plan, they can go ahead and move on to the next steps. And if they're not, they need to come ask the Planning Commission and City Council for an amendment to their application. Next up is the PDP, and kind of just what that basic document is. That typically is only approvable by City Council. There's some ability to administratively amend it. And then the ODP by design is actually in the purview of the Planning Commission to review and consider, specifically how the process was drafted, so that way City Council wouldn't see so many of them. And typically the reason why we're seeing them not go to city council is because they're asking for, they don't want to meet some sort of requirement and it's above your authority to approve that. But ODPs generally for amendments are typically all administrative approvals for amendments. And then after the development review process, there's 3 other steps that they follow. They need to get a land disturbance permit. That's kind of the civil construction drawings, a building permit for their buildings, and then finally they'll get a certificate of occupancy at the end. Next slide, please. So generally in our development review process, the first step is the pre-application review. This is in a meeting we meet with the consultants. We bring all of our internal development review partners, so fire department, public works, wastewater, storm sewer, the traffic team, parks department. We bring everybody to that meeting, and then we like to meet with their entire project team if they're available. So architects, engineers, property owner, everybody's welcome to attend. And we discuss the project at a very high level, kind of giving them the basic steps they need to take, what the approval process is, ensuring they know their zoning, the comp plan category, that they can access all the documents, and that we'll give them any feedback we know on things that we know of issues. And then it's also a time period where we'll also give them historical documents they might need, like other studies, subdivision plats and such. Then the applicant will go into drafting their site plan documents, whatever they have, and then they'll submit that in step 2. In step 3, we do our technical reviews. And that usually is, I'd say, a minimum of 3 rounds, and sometimes it could be 4 or 5, and in worst case scenarios, it goes way above that. Step 4 is public hearings if applicable. So this could be just the Planning Commission, or it could be City Council and Planning Commission. It's going to depend specifically on what they're asking for as far as to change on the plans or what they're seeking approval of. Typically, just as an FYI, the staff have the administrative approval authority of 10% from what is approved, so we can't approve anything more than a 10% deviation of a standard. And I think we're keeping that same for the UDC, right? Yeah, we're really not changing that at all.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
As far as the standards we can vary from for the UDC, we're keeping it at 10%, right? The threshold?
20.
We're going to 20? Oh, we're being bold. Okay, yeah, there we go.
And I'm actually going to talk about that later, but one reason we're going 20 is that so many of the numerical amounts are smaller.
Yes.
So something that maybe used to have a 100-foot setback, if staff could do 10%, that's 10 feet. But if a standard is now
5 feet.
Yeah,
and we're left with 6 inches.
Well, I was thinking like 30, but
oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so then
the 5-foot thing has come up multiple times recently. So, and then finally, if they have approval of their document, they'll go to a checkpoint review. And this is really just to make sure that the document is ready to be recorded at the county and it meets the formatting standards. And then we'll record the document. It's actually not required to record our zoning documents. That's not a requirement of law. It is just, we do that because these are essentially a contract that runs with the land. PUD system is essentially a contract where the applicant is agreeing to make something or do something with the city, and we agree to permit them to do that. And so when they don't build that, they're breaking our contract with us, which is not great. Next slide, please. So really quick on administrative approvals, we predominantly process all of our applications as administrative approvals. So on the PDP, again, the standard I think we are limited to, it's stricter on the PDP than it is on the ODP. This is really limited to like at entrance locations. If we had some language about architecture or design in there, but we're not allowed to really change standards in the PDP. In the ODP, since these are very much more specific to a site design, so oftentimes it could be they want to change the facade of a building, or all of a sudden they want to change a brick type that they can't buy that brick anymore, so they need a new one. That can be a lot of our amendments. We have 3 different tiers of amendments, and the vast majority of them are 2 smaller tiers where we don't require very much documentation for that. Then within our specific plans, we have 2 areas of the city that have specific plans, downtown and the station area. We do also require official development plans there. They are entirely administratively approvable. That was by design because we wanted to make it really fast and easy to develop in those locations. And the specific plans have very clear regulation on what's expected, and it gives us a limited authority on what we can vary from the plan, which is good and bad in both circumstances because we don't get that same flexibility we get in PUD, where we can make better contextual trade-offs. Landscape plan, we, under the current landscape regulations, the 2004 landscape regulations, the city, the planning manager has the full authority to vary from the landscape plan, landscape regulations. He doesn't have to seek, or the applicants don't have to seek approval of the planning commission or city council to do so. We're pretty strict on that requirement though, because that is still kind of an expectation of the city and the community, and we've heard that loud and clear that people still expect high quality landscaping. Even if we're going to go to xeriscaping, and I say that very clearly, xeriscaping, not zeroscaping, because we're in full support of going to xeriscaping, and it's actually what the 2004 landscape regulations were drafted to do. But people are misunderstanding that with this concept of zeroscaping, where they just rock everything, and that's not achieving any goals at all. Subdivision plats, those are also entirely administratively approvable. Conditional uses for some things like thrift stores under 5,000. You guys recently saw that thrift store that was over 5,000. Administrative variances, we have a 10% deviation. Sign plans and building permits, those are also administrative. Next slide, please. So the Planning Commission, right now you guys are a recommendation for original PDPs and PDP amendments, comprehensive plan amendments, and specific plans. The comprehensive plan itself, I should say, as well as the amendments to the comp plan and specific plans, and then rezonings. Your approval authority is for original ODPs not requiring city council review. There's a threshold category, so for residential projects, it's 10 acres. Anything over 10 acres has to come to the Planning Commission for an original ODP, and anything over 20 acres that's commercial has to come to the Planning Commission. As you may have heard Andrew say, we are at, what, 2% of the city not built out? So we don't really do very many original ODPs anymore. They're pretty rare. Like, I think you guys have seen probably 2 in the last 6 years that we were just approving authority on. So it's kind of, that's kind of where we'd start to look at this and see how can we change things or make things work better. So that's kind of where some of the lens we're taking to it. Special use permits, you are the approving authority, and then as well variances, which you are familiar with. So next slide, please. City Council approves original PDPs, and then here's the criteria for the PDP amendment. So new land uses, changing land area by more than 10%, density or intensity, setbacks, or a significant change by the city manager. The city manager also has some pretty broad authorities to decline to approve some things, and he can refer a lot of applications to the Planning Commission and City Council for review. We tend not to do that very often, mostly because it's very clear there's a lot of reasons why they have to come seek approval anyway. And you guys are pretty familiar with this as well. Most of our applicants are asking to deviate from a standard, at least 1 or 2, and some 30. So. City Council also approves the original comp plan, the specific plans, as well as amendments. They're the sole approver of rezonings, annexations, appeals. We did see an appeal recently. One that first came to you and then went back to them. And then they will approve ODPs. This one may be changing soon, but so they're for multifamily land uses. They're required to see those per a resolution they approved. The uplands projects, there's a condition of approval that City Council added that that City Council must be the approving authority for the ODPs for uplands, which is why they don't stop at your review. And then projects that are requesting exceptions. So that's another one that we've spoken about quite at length tonight. Next slide, please. So for review of staff, application review for staff timelines, this really depends by the project, and it can entirely depend upon how the discussions and negotiations go. The one thing I try to tell every landowner is consultants are busy. There's only so many consultants out here, and if you think your consultant's going to turn over your application in a week, it's not happening. They're not going to get the comments back on Monday and turn it back by Friday. It just doesn't happen unless you paid them specifically to do that and they have nothing else going on, which is not what we're experiencing here. What I'd say is every consultant is pretty busy right now across the Front Range. They're not, so just for like an administrative ODP, this would be for a pretty large one. Typically our smaller projects, tier 2s and tier 3s, we're getting those accomplished in a couple of weeks, typically. For a larger one, it could be a couple of months. Small pad sites, 4 to 5 months is a pretty good timeline. For something that comes to a public hearing, we tell our applicants to add 4 to 6 weeks for every public hearing, because that's the timeline that it takes us. Our agenda memos for city council are actually due 30 days in advance of the meeting. So we have kind of just an automatic, we have to factor that in for us. And then council currently has a process called the concept plan review, and that also is the same thing where you take it to council, you notice it, and that can add a considerable amount of time on there. The one we've been experiencing has been some of our concept plan reviews have been getting bumped off of the meeting agendas, and so they'll get pushed out many months. This one where they're going to hear later this month, I think. It's been pushed out since before the election. They were ready to go back in November, and they wanted to wait till the new city council was seated. So that's 4 months now that they've been delayed. So that's can be an added time frame as well. And then as far as technical review, it's really going to depend on the project and who's involved in the level of discussions and negotiations and the complexity as well. It can depend on that a lot. Next slide, please. Just kind of mapping out what we typically see as a response period. It's not common, but it does occur that applicants will use up a full month in between resubmittals. So we kind of just mapped it out to explain what that can look like if you add the applicant response time in. We have a couple of projects where they would routinely go 4 or 5 months in between getting their comments back and then doing a resubmittal. It happens, the Pillar of Fire barn, that came up with theirs. You guys recently heard the Valley View Estates one, that came up with theirs a lot. So we have a 180-day expiration period. So if you don't resubmit within 180 days, your application expires and you have to restart. So that's kind of the goal there is if you're going to occupy our time, please be serious about it and get something going. Because, I mean, a month is I'd say, around average or typical. Maybe it's a little faster than that. But going beyond a month is unfortunately pretty common. Next slide, please. Just as an example of a project, just to explain here, was the Orchard Estates project. So under 10 acres, so it's a residential project. It could have been eligible for the PC approval. Infill location, they generally met the majority of the single-family detached design standards, but they did have 7 different exceptions they were requesting. The way the design standards were written is that city staff cannot amend them or vary from them at all. Any change requested to them has to go to the city council for consideration. So it goes above even the planning commission for review. Before we had the design standards, we had design guidelines, and we were afforded the ability to vary from them quite considerably. And so that kept a lot of applications out of going to the city council. And switching to the design standards has referred a lot of applications to them. Next slide, please. And that's it for me. If you want to take a break, Chair.
Does anyone need a break right now, or you guys, or do you want to keep going? Commissioner Pegg.
Is now a good time for questions?
Yeah, this would probably be a good time.
Yeah, you can definitely ask a question.
I just have one. You said that staff could approve a 20% deviation from the requirements, but on slide 18 it showed 10%.
It's 10%.
Your mic's not on.
It's 10% currently. With the UDC, we're proposing to go to 20.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
We do have, we put the break at the halfway point, but we could do John's piece and then revisit if a break's desired at that time, or just finish it.
Yep. Everyone seems like we can keep going, so let's go to Mr. McConnell and let him do the next piece.
Yeah, so full of energy tonight. We underestimated you. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we incorporate the city's vision into new development. Andrew will cover this shortly in the next segment, but as you've probably recognized already, we're almost completely built out. Our future is infill and redevelopment, and those scenarios become pretty hard and difficult. A lot of the sites that are still vacant at this point in our history are vacant for a reason. They're difficult. They lack access to utilities, proper access. The size, shape of the lot may be difficult to develop on. And we'll touch on that a little bit more, but incorporating, being very decisive about the city's vision through the comprehensive plan is really critical, and updating that comprehensive plan periodically is also very critical to adjust to changing development patterns in the city. So,
Yeah, I'll just.
will you? Next slide, please. So as noted earlier, and Jacob said it very eloquently, the comprehensive plan is for future growth and development. It does recognize the existing development typologies. As you can see from the comprehensive plan map on the left, much of the city is residential, and that's in the yellow, orange, and brown colors. And a large portion of the city is parks, golf courses, open spaces that help bring a really high quality of life to the city and its residents. And fewer areas are devoted to non-residential land uses. And those are very important too, and it's important that the comprehensive plan maintain an appropriate balance and mixture of those things. We rely on retail sales tax to pay for everything that the city provides, all the services, and so maintaining proper appropriate levels of employment land uses, commercial activity, and putting those things in the right places and in the right quantities to support the residents is really critical. But also getting a balanced mixture of residential land uses in the proper place. So while the comprehensive plan is the roadmap or the vision, the zoning map and the zoning regulations are the vehicle that takes you there. And so a zoning ordinance by nature is an implementation tool for that vision. And as I mentioned earlier to you in our pre-meeting, the zoning, sorry, lost my place here. Let me come back to that. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So one of the main tenets in our current comprehensive plan, and this is a carryover from the 2013 comprehensive plan, is the concept of focus areas. And in the current comp plan, we've added a new term, and that is transition areas. And so the focus areas, just like in 2013, they're areas where we have the greatest potential for growth. And that may be for several reasons. It's because we have some vacant land that's available to develop. We might have infill opportunities in existing developed areas. And we also have these areas positioned around transportation networks. And specifically, when you look at the downtown, which is in the dark red color there, the burgundy color, or the Church Ranch focus area, which is in the mustard color, those have access to some of the best transit that RTD offers, which is the Flatiron Flyer stations. And I know that's a relative term, but it's a really, really active corridor. And so focusing residential density around transit, focusing commercial activity allows people to take advantage of the transit, thereby lowering their cost of living. They potentially could choose to ride a bike like Tim does here, or at least park their car and take transit for many of their trips. So it's really important to focus on those focus areas and make sure we have the right mixture of land uses there to really help people thrive. So among the focus areas, I mentioned the downtown and the Church Ranch focus area. There's also the Westminster Station, which is down around 72nd and Federal, and that's another transit-oriented development, just like the downtown. But we also have focus areas up on the northern end of town, up near the Orchard. And so that's the North I-25 focus area. That has a different concept in play there, a somewhat different concept. We're trying to focus a lot of our employment land uses there. It has direct interstate access with exits to 136 and 144th on either end of that focus area. And so the city envisions a mixture of commercial uses that support the employment land uses as well as the residents around there. There is some decent residential density in the Orchard Town Center, which is north of 144th. A really prominent tax generator there too, with that shopping center and that mixed-use center. Much of the residential land uses around there are pretty low density because that was the outer limits of suburbia when a lot of that was developed. So again, really the vision there is to concentrate a lot of employment land uses, and it's somewhat different from the visions that we have in the other focus areas that are really focused around transit. One of those focus areas that I'll highlight tonight is the Brook Hill focus area. And this focus area is located near the intersection of Wadsworth Parkway and north of 88th Avenue and south of West 92nd Avenue. It's shown here, and this is a page taken from the comprehensive plan. It's shown here with a brief description of what that focus area envisions, with graphics showing some key elements of what that vision sees for the area. And again, this is the comprehensive plan. This is for future development. We recognize that much of Brook Hill, if not all of it's fully developed right now. But we do see infill potential over time and redevelopment over time as the community changes. So if you notice on this graphic, you see the major streets, 88th, 90th, West 92nd Avenue, Wadsworth Parkway. You see images that, or icons that show where we see a primary gateway. And what that is it recognizes that you're transitioning, in this case, from Arvada on the south side of 88th, the southeast side of 88th, and you're entering into Westminster. So a lot of traffic moves through this area and a lot of pass-through traffic comes in. But we want to make sure that as things develop and redevelop, that we have elements there that say welcome to Westminster, and you're moving from Arvada to Westminster, and there's some distinction there. You also have secondary gateways, which is a smaller little sunshine emblem. And so that's envisioned on 88th Avenue near what would be possibly in the future an extension of Old Wads. And that's what that blue line is showing there that runs north and south. And so you'll notice that blue line extends northward, north of 90th Avenue, and twists and turns and connects to Old Wads above 92nd Avenue. And that's shown as another gateway. And so I'm going to show you a couple of other slides that illustrate how that plan is started to implement. Andrew?
Yeah, there we go.
There. So those of you that have been around Westminster for a long time probably remember the aerial on the left. That was taken in 2014. And you'll notice that there's a nice park there on the right-hand side of the screen along Vance Street. And then there's a rather large big box footprint that's in the Brook Hill Shopping Center. And the Brook Hill Shopping Center, just for reference, is the one with Hofbrau in it. Hofbrau's been there for a long time. You have Murdoch's, Epic Mountain Gear, so if you're familiar with those businesses, that's the shopping center. But that larger footprint used to be a business called Builder Square, and it was very similar to Home Depot or Lowe's. It was a large home improvement type store. For various reasons, that business left the building, and that building sat vacant for, I think, over a decade. So it was vacant over 10 years ago when I moved to Westminster and started working with Westminster, and it's got close to a century. It felt like that to the community, and so it caused a level of perceived blight there. Having a vacant building, a vacant parking lot for that long. People often complained about it. When's the city going to do something about it? Of course, the private market really wasn't, pushing anything there at the time. So with the 2013 comprehensive plan and that Brook Hill focus area vision, we redesignated this to a mixed-use category that would allow, with city council approval, integration of residential land uses with the commercial land uses. And Andrew, if you go back one slide, if you remember the blue line shown on this plan between West 90th and West 92nd, that's really envisioned to be an extension of Old Wads to connect West 92nd down to West 90th. And so right now, it's just a shopping center parking lot, but the focus area vision says that should be a connector street, provide more walkability and connectivity on that block as the shopping center might decline in the future and redevelopment scenarios are more feasible. So you'll go back to the aerial. Yeah, thanks. So as you can see, that's really the main drive aisle right now going in front of the inline buildings. But if you look to the right and you see the current aerial photograph and the more recent development of the MAA apartments, you'll see that street is beginning to shape up. And so with the development of the MAA apartments, we were able to work with that developer to dedicate that street right-of-way. So that's not just a drive aisle that's extending into the apartments from 90th Avenue. That's a public street. It's Wadsworth Boulevard. And so the public street ends at Hofbrau right now. But in the future, if that owner decides to redevelop or infill develop, we'll work with them to extend that street if it makes sense to the owner and the city at the time. And so, but this first development set the stage for that future development. Okay. So this is a close-up of that same aerial. And I wanted to point to some key elements. Jacob did a good job of talking about how we negotiate land use regulations. And there are a lot of regulations that apply from engineering, stormwater, transportation, traffic, all the way to planning stuff like design and architecture. So in this case, the focus area envisioned a more urban form and a higher density of residential land uses and a mixture of uses there. So again, this being the first step to the overall redevelopment of Brook Hill, this sets the stage for the future pattern going north when it's appropriate. But as you can see, the buildings are a a little more structured in an urban form. There's the street that runs its way, it winds its way through the middle of the development. There are a lot of pedestrian connectivity, sidewalks like you would typically find along a street. And so there's a high degree of walkability and connectivity. You'll notice that there is a dash line that runs from an existing RTD bus stop up on Wadsworth Boulevard down the existing sidewalk. And then there was a new connector that connected the multi-use trail along Wadsworth Boulevard, and it's kind of twisty like a snake there, and it winds its way down to the east into the apartment complex. And so that all the sidewalk connections within what kind of looks like just like an apartment complex on the outside really create this kind of robust pedestrian grid. If you look to the right side or the east side of the development, you'll see a pair of shoes there. That's just an indication of where we worked with the developer to make a connection to West Glen Park. If you remember the old Builder Square when it was there, that was just a big box that backed up and isolated that piece of property from that park. And so it was important to help this developer realize that they have a really, really nice neighborhood asset there. And there was some grade and some berming there, but we were able to help them realize a connection to that. And now all those residents have access to that park just by walking out of their doors and down the sidewalk. Some other unique features here, you see the raindrops. So with any more dense urban type development, you still have stormwater regulations. And the engineers in the room and others understand that those regulations, they're really not bendable. You can't ignore them. You have to accommodate all the stormwater that you create from new impervious surfaces. So in this case, we help the developer explore rain gardens. And that's just a creative way to handle your stormwater quality and some of your stormwater quantity in a more compact way, in a more eco-friendly way. And so this is one of the first scenarios, may have been the first scenario we had in the city where we allowed something like that. And if you go out there today, you should see some signs that talk about that uniqueness there, and so that people, when they walk by, they don't think it's just a hole in the ground with some plants growing into it, or a trash pit that they can throw their trash in. They see a sign there that says, hey, this is a rain garden, this is what a rain garden is, and this is how it works. So it's educational in a way. So if you go to the next slide, this is kind of what it looks like on the ground. I'm guessing you all have been through here before, so you're probably really familiar with it. Again, that's Wadsworth Boulevard, not just an apartment drive aisle. So, Andrew, go to the next one. Can you go back 2 slides? One more. Yeah. So, as I've mentioned before, infill development and redevelopment scenarios are really tricky. We worked with Mr. Bedrin, the property owner. He doesn't live in the state. He lives in New Jersey, but he's very active and proactive with the city, and he's very interested in developing and redeveloping. He was really excited about the comp plan in 2013, and we worked with him for several years, not only with this MAA project, but reimagining what those big parking lots could be and how we could extend the Wadsworth Boulevard there, and those businesses would all of a sudden have street frontage and parking right in front of their doors. The challenge to this site is there's a lot of underground infrastructure. There is a storm sewer line and a sanitary sewer line that run north-south through the property, and it's a public main. And so it's deep underground. It's not easily moved. There's underground stormwater detention on the north end of the site. So he had a really difficult time finding a developer that could deal with those challenges financially. And so as hard as he tried, he could not make that work. So for the time being, this is going to be a shopping center until such time those variables change. when the economics are more favorable to it, we may see some further redevelopment here. So, all right, Andrew, take it away. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew, and he's going to bring us on to the finish line unless you guys want to take a break.
Looks like we can keep going, but I do want to give you appreciation for your graphics on there, the beer for the Hofbrau, the burger for the Good Times, and the apple for the Applebee's.
Symbols everybody can recognize, right?
I did have one question about that. I know it's really hard to zoom across that parking lot since it doesn't exist anymore. There's apartments in your way now. But has there been any pushback from Applebee's or others about the reduction in parking or any of the other businesses there on that side of that development?
I'm not aware of anything on the Applebee's side. I know Hofbrau, they have a high patronage there, so they tend to fill up the parking lot. But that parking lot is so big. I'm not aware of any issues where they've lacked parking for all their patrons. I imagine there may have been a day when you could park a little closer to the entrance, but people were probably having to park further out in the parking lot, but I don't know that there's a capacity issue.
As a patron, I definitely they definitely took out a role of the closer parking that was to the south, and so now you've got to park a little bit farther north or farther closer to Wadsworth. But yeah, there's plenty of parking in that lot. I've never seen it even close to full.
Well, you just walk off that big meal that you had at Hofbrau.
Sure,
Yes.
I don't think it's the meal that needs to be walked off from Hofbrau. I'd say that particular place is lucky in as much that the other tenants are not like big draws, except at certain times of the year. I mean, Murdoch's has got a pretty big draw to it every once in a while, Ski Hut the other way, but the hobby shop, the liquor store, the other things that are in there probably balance all that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a relatively healthy shopping center, comparatively speaking. There's some good tenants that have been there for a long time.
It's just that none of the other ones seem to have a lot of draw at any particular time with how often.
It balances out. Yeah.
All right, thank you, John. Kind of continuing some of the things we already talked about, but as John introduced with his section, our future growth in the city really is our focus areas and infill and redevelopment areas. Only about 4% of our land is remaining, as we talked about. That's 2.3% when you net out places that already have applications either under review or in some cases already approved. And that 2.3%, it's about 493 acres, about 190-ish properties is really all we're talking about now. So we anticipate most of the future growth will be in infill and redevelopment. Infill meaning perhaps a vacant piece of land, but it's surrounded by otherwise developed properties, and in many cases it may be encumbered for one reason or another based on the existing development around it. And then redevelopment, if you think of like downtown Westminster where the mall used to be, this is where existing uses are removed or altered, and a new use, new type of development takes place on something that was previously developed. This is important because our codes and our standards were really from an era when Westminster was more of a greenfield community. It was a new suburb. There was a lot of land. Someplace like Castle Rock or Parker today, where there's just a lot of land and they're just growing outwards. Our standards really have not made this same shift yet, and so that's what we're trying to do with the Unified Development Code. really, we got a lot of policy direction from the new comprehensive plan, but also strategies in the sustainability plan, the transportation mobility plan, the housing needs assessment, the redevelopment adaptive reuse toolkit. All those things made a lot of recommendations on our codes and our development standards that we need to update. So the UDC is going to include zoning and use regulations, site and building standards, provisions to administer the code and its procedures, or simply put, it's the rule book for entitling land for development. The scope of the UDC is citywide with generally applicable standards and procedures. It's not geographic specific. We do have our downtown Westminster and Westminster Station specific plans, and these are sort of parallel codes with zoning and design standards specific to those places, and those would remain in place and be independent from the UDC. The UDC is not intended to be retroactive. It's something that staff would use proactively on future applications for development or redevelopment. Staff is not proposing to rezone any existing property, something other than what it is today. But the comprehensive plan would remain controlling, of course. And finally, we do remind some audiences that the proposed Unified Development Code, or UDC, it will be a part of the municipal code, but there's a lot of other parts of municipal code that do other things for other purposes, such as alcohol sales and animal management, short-term rentals, restrictions on cannabis sales, all those kind of things are addressed in other parts of municipal code. So we did come to the Planning Commission actually 4 times last year, and we appreciate you indulging us in these workshops. They were very helpful to us. Hopefully they were helpful to you. We talked about zoning, the proposed zoning and districts and uses, getting those to better align with the comprehensive plan, having more options for mixed-use development, more ways to achieve housing diversity, and then some use-specific regulations. We talked about our development standards, the idea of having both standards and guidelines, the concept of differentiating urban and suburban development patterns, so it's not one size fits all. And having the right provisions in place for infill redevelopment and adaptive reuse. We talked about procedures at the July workshop with opportunities for greater flexibility built into the zoning, as well as a range of site layout options and locational adjustments. All that to say is trying to get out of the business of exceptions. We heard that from the commissioners that night who made comments. That's something we want to get away from. And then it was a few months, but then we came back to you with the first public draft and walked through what that looked like. And this is just an excerpt on that. We will be preparing a new draft. It's still under development at this time, but we will, once it is ready, we will put that back out. And obviously you will understand that this is not something you get on a Wednesday or Thursday and vote on the next week. You're going to need a little time. We get that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. These are slides that we have shown the commission before, but just to understand the Unified Development Code, it's sort of the instructions for development, the comprehensive plan, sustainability plan, transportation plan. These things are setting policy, and then the Unified Development Code is really that technical provisions on how do you actually achieve these things. And I'll just show an example. The sustainability plan has actually 2 strategies pertaining to solid waste management and making sure that solid waste collection is designed in a way that's efficient and that people actually use it, and it's integrated with larger site plan concerns. So that's just a concept, and then the Unified Development Code would actually provide more numerical standards on where that gets placed, how big it needs to be, how you access it, how you screen it so it's not an eyesore, those kind of things. So just separating out this concept of policies with technical provisions. The Unified Development Code is unified in the sense that it's taking Westminster Municipal Code, or updating Westminster Municipal Code, and what are currently the 7 separate design standards or design guideline documents that all live independently, and bringing them all into a one-stop shop. And so that's why we say it's unified. The documents we work with now were mostly put in place in 1997. They have been updated a few times along the way, but not comprehensively since 1997. So it's time to do that update. I'm going to stop and talk about zoning for a minute. Jacob and John also talked about our zoning pattern in Westminster, but just to tie it back into what we're looking at with the Unified Development Code, most of our zoning is planned unit development, or PUD. That's about 67% of the city, 2/3 of the pie chart. Really, it's write your own zoning. The regulations get tailored to a specific property or neighborhood. Within each PUD, there's provisions for allowed uses, lot dimensions, building placement, amenities, that kind of thing. Staff has recommended to City Council that we would leave the existing planned unit developments in place, and we would use the Unified Development Code again in the future for new development and redevelopment. We have spoken with staff in other communities in the Front Range that tried to unwind their PUDs and rezone them to something else. It did not sound like the juice was worth the squeeze. It sounded like it caused a lot of frustration with residents. And in the end, what are you really accomplishing? These areas, these neighborhoods are not going to, they're not going to be torn down or bulldozed. So we didn't think that was worth it, and that's something we've presented to council. But we would work, proactively with new development or redevelopment. Downtown and Westminster Station, as I mentioned earlier, have specific plan zoning, and that's sort of a parallel code. And then we have our O1 open and agricultural district that covers about 20% of the city. So if you think about the planned unit development, the specific plan districts in the O1, that's 88% of the city's land area. So it really just leaves a very small 12% of the city's land area with more conventional zoning that you might see in other cities, such as residential or commercial or industrial. And that's primarily in the southern most part of the city. I'm going to introduce just a few topics of interest, and this is based on things we heard from City Council when we presented this presentation to them last week, actually. So one thing, besides our extensive use of PUD, one thing that makes Westminster unique is that we really try to think about the public realm when we're planning development. In most communities, zoning really looks at the private lot and then not beyond that. What we've been doing and what we're going to do even more of with the Unified Development Code is really taking some of the built form concepts and looking at the entire public realm, looking at the entire block and the composition of buildings within the block, the setback area, how that's used, if there is a setback, the sidewalk, the right-of-way, the whole experience of the public realm and how people move around and experience a place. That will be done through menus in the Unified Development Code of different building types, different street types, different civic space types, all those things put together. And I just want to show an example of what this looks like. On the left is a very large multifamily building being built in Denver. It's 18 stories, market rate. It has 4-foot sidewalks. I actually called Denver and asked, how was that possible? And Denver told me, zoning, they just look at the private lot. They do not look once you leave the private lot. And then Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, DOTI, does what's in the right-of-way. So contrast that to what we've been doing in downtown Westminster, where we're trying to get 8, 10, even 12-foot sidewalks because we want people out. We do think about the experience. And so it's just a different way of looking at things. And that's one of the ways Westminster is different. We've been challenged on how does it support housing, and we were specifically given 2 books or manuals to review. One of them was the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook, and this was introduced actually last year at National League of Cities, and then the Colorado Starter Home Initiative. Having gone through both documents and looking at all their recommendations, the Unified Development Code is incorporating all of the recommendations in one way or another. And I won't go through all of them because it's a very long list, but the procedures, the provisions for missing middle housing and accessory dwelling units, the administrative flexibility, anticipating build-out and planning for it, the regional housing needs assessment that Dr. Cog conducted last year said Westminster is short 7,300 units. Our comprehensive plan accommodates almost 11,000 units, so we're above that. Relaxing standards on things such as parking setbacks, non-conforming use procedures. One of the recommendations is not having a minimum unit size, which is not something that we have now or propose to have. That was all from the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook. From the Starter Home Initiative, things like incorporating anti-monotony standards, removing occupancy limits, which has already been done by ordinance, conducting pre-applications and completeness reviews to help applicants move forward, administrative alternatives. I feel good that we're incorporating the recommendations out of both of those academic documents. And again, thinking about our future development patterns, and really there's going to be 3 important types of patterns. Adaptive reuse, where an existing building is reused and potentially expanded, even maybe pop the top with an additional story and reconsidered into something else. Redevelopment, using literally the example John just presented, where there was an existing use that was obsolete and the land was repurposed into something else. And then infill, where we have these small pieces of land all over town that are surrounded by built-out areas, and then getting the right projects into those. For adaptive reuse, redevelopment, and infill, which in the UDC each have a very specific definition, there is greater flexibility in terms of how we apply the standards. It'd be sort of a sliding scale way of treating them that would provide potential reductions in setbacks, lot dimensions, outdoor space, landscaping, and parking. And then very specific provisions if you have small lots, there's additional relief, understanding that when you have a very small lot, there's only so much you can really do within the confines of that property. This is just example showing some of the standards that are being revisited with the Unified Development Code. The one on the upper left is looking at the setbacks from an arterial street, something like 92nd or Sheridan outside. And then, again, this concept of having different standards for urban and suburban contexts. And then on the right side, looking at updating our parking requirements, bringing those down to a degree, but with some specific exceptions. On top of changing the ratios, providing more opportunities for alternatives, whether that's through shared parking, transportation demand management, proximity to transit facilities would qualify for reductions, adding additional bicycle parking, and then lower parking requirements for senior and special needs housing as well. How does the UDC impact me? We get asked that question a lot. For most households and businesses, the UDC probably will not change their life all that much. If we stay with staff recommendation not to undo the existing plan unit developments and specific plans, again, that's about 68% of our city's land area. When a property is proposed for a major redevelopment with new buildings or changes in uses, that's when the Unified Development Code would come into play. Be mindful that the comprehensive plan remains controlling the land uses, densities, the development formats in the comprehensive plan, that remains controlling. But implementing the comprehensive plan through the UDC will allow greater introduction of the concepts from the comprehensive plan and sustainability plan and the other plans that I talked about, things like housing diversity and sustainability concepts, mixed-use development patterns, all those things that we've talked about in this presentation tonight. Our next steps would be to continue to develop an updated draft and then put that out for review by the public, review by the Planning Commission, further review by staff. And then we want to do some staffing analysis to make sure we have the right people and the right skills to implement the UDC. Legal review, super important. And then when it's ready, come back to the Planning Commission where you would make a recommendation to the City Council and then to City Council for action, hopefully in the coming months. And that concludes the presentation.
Great. Thank you. That was very comprehensive. Commissioner Peck.
I have 2 questions. Is now a good time? Great. My first one is, you said we were short 7,300 units. Is there any estimate from DRCOG about how that is changing in time?
I don't believe they addressed it that way.
Okay.
What I do know is that they had done an earlier study that showed us at over 8,000, and it actually decreased to 7,300. So I kind of felt, oh, we're kind of tracking in the right direction.
That's how, okay. That's a change across studies, but like, is there an estimated, it's a housing needs assessment. So I guess my question is, how is the estimated housing need changing in time? Is that part of the housing needs assessment?
I don't know that they looked at it that way, but I'm probably not the best person to speak to
Okay,
that.
and I guess my next question is, you said we have room in the comp plan for 11,000 more homes.
10,900 and something, yeah.
Let's round. So I guess my question is, how quickly do you estimate that those additional 7,300 homes will develop?
It'll be as the market brings them forward.
But do you have a rough idea of that?
I do not, because I have been extremely disappointed. We've had a TOD zoned for our highest density in the city for almost 10 years and not had a single multifamily development come forward there.
And then my next question is, I saw that staff could approve, I think it was 20 to 50% reductions on parking. Is that the range that we are contemplating putting in the UDC, or is that range inspired by other rules or where some development? What I'm trying to ask really is where some development falls in that 10 to 50% administrative reduction. Is that set up by other rules? What's going on there?
Good question. So the way it's drafted right now is that there's sort of your standard parking requirements, the stuff that's in the upper rows of the table, and then there's a series of different options to reduce parking, and it's going to be based on the use, the location, and frankly the applicant's choice. If they choose to incorporate the transportation demand management provisions, it's 25% reduction. If it's the transit proximity reduction, that's 10% or 20% based on the level of transit service, if it's rail versus bus and so forth. 10% if you're doing 10% parking reduction for cars, if you're doing the additional bike parking, 50% reduction for senior and special needs housing. So there's different percentage decreases depending on which option.
Okay,
So
okay.
the options are as little as 10% or as much as 50.
And I guess my question is, we have this whole complicated set of rules, but if we had no requirement here, what do you anticipate would actually happen?
We'd probably have a lot of parking.
We'd probably have a lot of parking. So why have the rule?
We can discuss that further with City Council.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Great. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, one or two.
Commissioner Tomanchuk.
Yep. The 2.3% of buildable land that isn't built out yet, does that include land parcels that we know are just not buildable?
No, this is, we always say it's vacant, developable land.
Okay.
So it doesn't include floodplains, steep slopes, stuff that's encumbered by a giant city easement or things like that, yeah.
Okay. There's still I say a fair amount, I don't know the exact square miles or acreage, that's unincorporated Adams and unincorporated Jeffco. Do our water use assessments include those homes and the zoning and development plans for those individual counties as opposed to using the rules we have in-house?
Yes and no. Yes, because for the most part, we are the water provider for the enclaves in Adams and Jefferson County, Shaw Heights, Sherrillwood, those whole areas. So we're already the water provider. In fact, we're the water provider for Waterworld even.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty good handle on the accounts, and they were included in that audit.
Okay, that was really my question. And secondarily to that, are their development rules similar enough to ours that they won't suddenly knock down a bunch of businesses and put up a crap ton of apartment complexes and outrun what we're estimating for them? Do we have enough influence over that to make sure they don't dent our capabilities here?
Sure. So ultimately, they do fall under our utility service regulations, even when they're outside the city. That our utility service regulations would apply. Our tap fees apply, and those are not insignificant. And there's actually a higher rate for out of city. But I do believe that we looked, or I say we, the staff, not Andrew personally, but the staff did look at the development patterns, knowing that Federal Heights, we also provide the water to Federal Heights, knowing that Federal Heights and a lot of these areas are more or less also built out. I think we feel pretty confident at this point.
Okay. And how much?
They do have contracted amounts, so they can't go over their contracted amount unless we revisit the contract.
Do we have agreements with those two counties or any of the other jurisdictions that might have land within the boundaries of Westminster to try to abide by the UDC, or do they basically develop on their own using the county standards or Fed Heights or wherever that might be?
In the unincorporated counties, so not Federal Heights or other, but in the unincorporated, our typical process is when a completely undeveloped piece of land chooses to develop and it needs access to the utility system, we actually force annexation.
Okay. So you're attempting to influence the counties as much as you can?
Yeah, it would actually, my understanding, and particularly with the Jefferson County staff, it's actually their preference that the city would annex these properties. It's assumed that as urbanization occurs from, these remnants of agricultural properties, it's assumed that once something goes from agricultural to more of a urban level of development, that it becomes part of the city.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Kinnear.
I just want to make sure we understand that Westminster does have control over water use in those areas simply by the fact that we've contracted for a fixed amount of water. You do whatever you want in your land area, Federal Heights or whatever. This is all the water you're going to get from us. Is that fair?
That sounds right. We're a little bit outside of my lane.
Yeah,
but
okay.
That sounds like my understanding.
Yeah, all right.
Jacob's going to add something.
Good.
Commissioner Kinnear, so the one difference is like Federal Heights, they are a wholesale purchaser of water from us. They buy an allocation. If you're in unincorporated Adams County or Jefferson County, you have a single tap for your own, like Shaw Heights, and they buy that tap from us, and then they buy water, just like you do, 1 gallon at a time through the meter. And so when we institute drought restrictions this summer, which I guarantee is happening, they get the same drought restrictions as well. And then because they only have purchased a single tap for a single home, they can't take that same tap and turn it into an apartment building. They'd have to come purchase a new tap from us at the city, in which case we may choose not to do that. We have in many instances chosen not to provide taps to properties in the county. In some instances, we have not required annexation. It depends on each project.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks. I'm going to pile on this subject just a second. Now, isn't some of the land at the southern end of the city, like along Lowell, still in Crestview Water District, so it's not really in control of the city?
It's a municipal code requirement that new water comes from the city, so as those properties sell and change use, we bring them into the cities.
Okay, so unincorporated Adams County, if they're currently in Crestview and Crestview will sell them a tap, they can do whatever they want, basically, on our transitional boundary.
Yeah, outside the city limits, that's certainly possible.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to be clear there. Yeah, yes, let me get back to my notes here. I had a couple of items that I wanted to discuss. The one thing with the built form in the public realm and the reduction of setbacks, one thing we need to consider is potential future right-of-way considerations, which that's one thing a setback can be good for, is to make sure that if Sheridan or 92nd needs to be expanded, that we're not building right up to the edge of the sidewalk and choking, putting a permanent chokehold on the road. Also, the taller buildings that close to the road, you're going to end up with shadows. And even though this year is not indicative of normal, we do get snow here, and we don't use a ton of salt to melt it. So we're going to have that runoff that'll freeze overnight and cause black ice. So and maybe stay in the shade all day. So those I think should be considerations, at least. And maybe we're stepping back the upper stories to allow more sunlight or something like that. Those are, I think, considerations we should be looking at there. Yeah, as far as parking reductions, I think we should look into opportunities for parking sharing, parking reductions. However, every time we have any plan come before us, one of the number one complaints of the public is parking, and we just if you drive through our residential neighborhoods already, you already see that there are 6 cars in the driveway and 5 cars on the street in front of some of these houses. So we need to make sure that we're taking that into account. And I'm all for, the creative ideas like using on-street parking as some of the required parking, but I think we need to be aware. At the same time, maybe we can talk to the developers during the process and say, maybe we don't need 700 spaces here for the Walmart, or for Brook Hill, I think was a good example. That's a very underused parking lot right now. And then, I guess my only other comment was kind of back to Mr. Kaza's presentation about the development timelines and stuff. And I love your 10-month development timeline. That it does not seem like it lives in any reality in which I've spent my professional life. And I think your 15-month timeline is a lot better. But the one bad side of our PUD zoning is that we are negotiating a lot. Currently we're negotiating the exceptions. Hopefully with the UDC, we're going to have fewer exceptions to have to deal with. But that negotiation of standards and how it looks, there's a lot of back and forth, and it's not just the consultants consultants, it could be the developer. And I've personally seen, as an engineer, one sentence comment that looks minor that redesigns an entire site. So that, which adds at least 4 to 6 weeks of time to get everything back to there. So that's, we just have, I know it's a difficult thing to do, but I think we just need to make sure that we're working with the consultants and the owners and making sure that we're all working there, because I've been on this planning commission for 15 years. I have seen, I think the most I ever saw for revisions was about 4 years, but 2 to 3 calendar years is not out of the question for some of these bigger projects. And I think we, the royal we, not pointing fingers at anyone in this room, but I think we all could do better at moving these projects forward, and hopefully this UDC is going to be a pathway to that. And that's all I have. Does anyone else have a comment? Commissioner Pegg.
I do now have more parking questions. As Chair Carpenter mentioned, some people do own a lot of cars, and I'm curious if, has anybody looked at how does the availability of free parking affect household car ownership?
That's not something I have a budget to do.
Okay.
Good question, though. Any other questions? All right, so I'm not sure if I heard, but I know you've got some internal review and some rewriting, and then you're going to be bringing it back for public comment. Do you kind of an estimated timeline for when we're going to see the next draft and potentially, and then from there, when you think we might be actually voting on this?
We're hoping to have the next draft this month. In fact, I had hoped to have it in hand by now, but it's not ready yet. I'm still going through some unresolved issues there, but probably later this month. And then, we'd leave that open for a month or so, and then do like a final draft after that. So I would guess at this point, probably May or June at the soonest.
Okay, perfect. All right, one more bite at the apple. All right. Right, thank you very much, everybody, for your presentation. I really appreciate the update, and it's very interesting information.
Right. And yeah, we'll be back, and we'll have more to talk about.
Sounds good. Anyone have anything else for the good of the order? If not, our next meeting is April 14th, and
Correct.
we will see you then. And this meeting is adjourned at 8 p.m. Have a good night.